Glam rock was dead. David Bowie killed it himself. Kind of. But what came next was something far more dangerous. A new sound, a new persona, and a descent into madness that nearly destroyed him. This is the dark history of David Bowie around the time he recorded and released Young Americans, how the song aligned with everything going on in Bowie's life at that time, and what immediately followed as he transitioned into the Thin White Duke. Hi, I'm Andy Fenstermaker, host of Poetic Wax, a weekly music history series and podcast where I dig into the record collection I've been building since the 1990s to explore the sometimes little-known history of a band, album, or song from within. We all know him as David Bowie. Born David Robert Jones, Bowie held a wide range of personas throughout his life and his musical career. Today we'll travel back to March of 1975 for a glimpse at the dark history behind Young Americans and Bowie's transition from glam to plastic soul to the Thin White Duke. And in next week's episode, we'll dive into Station to Station and Bowie's fascination with the occult. But we'll start with his fascination of America. David Bowie, like many English rock stars before him, saw America both as a land of boundless opportunity and of existential dread. His first visit to New York in 1971 introduced him to the Velvet Underground, Warhol's factory scene, Warhol himself, and the city's dark underbelly. This is something I covered a while back, recounting the first time he met Warhol. But as Bowie would come to discover, America wasn't just a cultural playground. It was also a place of violence, corruption, addiction, and soul-crushing excess. By 1974, Bowie had fully immersed himself in American culture, basing himself in New York and later in Los Angeles, the latter being a city he claimed to despise. Despite his disdain, he found himself drawn into its web, ultimately spiraling into heavy drug use. He became obsessed with the occult, which we'll get into next week. He found himself more and more paranoid, believing aliens, demons, and even Satan himself were all out to get him. Though far from racist, he became fascinated with the Third Reich's rise to power. Things got dark, fast, and more on parts of that in a moment. Let's first look at the death of glam and the birth of plastic soul. Up until this point, Bowie had been the face of glam rock, alien-like, theatrical, and androgynous. We'd see just how radical a shift he'd make upon the debut of Young Americans in early 1975. Bowie called it plastic soul, a white Englishman's version of R&B, crafted with meticulous precision, but a step removed from its authentic roots. This shift was sparked by Ava Cherry, a singer and model who introduced Bowie to Harlem's soul scene, artists like Marvin Gaye, Stevie Wonder, and Luther Vandross. And she took him to the legendary Apollo Theater. Bowie, always a chameleon, fully absorbed these influences. He recruited soul musicians like Vandross himself and guitarist Carlos Alomar, forging a sound that was both a love letter to and an appropriation of Black American music. Bowie sought out a new creative space, finding it in Philadelphia's Sigma Sound Studios, the birthplace of Philly soul. This genre, known for its lush string arrangements, driving horns, and complex harmonies, was the perfect sonic backdrop for Bowie's next reinvention. His recording process was relentless. Sessions ran deep into the night, fueled by cocaine and manic energy. Band members recall Bowie pacing the studio, barely eating, obsessing over every single detail. The drugs fueled the sessions, and the creativity spiraling in Bowie's head fueled more drug use. He didn't want to sleep, afraid to miss a single second of potential recording time. Session musicians are rumored to have said he worked like a madman, and I don't think he slept a wink. The title track, Young Americans, is a frantic, disjointed stream of consciousness, reflecting a distorted vision of America. The lyrics reference McCarthyism, Rosa Parks, and Nixon's resignation, painting a picture of a country in turmoil.
I might not have the support of the Congress that I would consider necessary to back the very difficult decisions and carry out the duties of this office in the way the interests of the nation will require.
Yet it also touches on the excesses, like Ford Mustangs, Cadillacs, and Chryslers. There's a hint of romance and sex, and yes, violence as well. In a 1975 interview with NME, Bowie commented on the song, stating, Young Americans is about a newlywed couple who don't know if they really like each other. Well, they do, but they don't know if they do or don't. It's a bit of a predicament. The song, at face value, is catchy and upbeat with a soulful melody and an incredibly memorable chorus. But dive into the lyrics, and they're probably about as dark as you get from Bowie. Well, 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 would you carry a razor just in case of depression? And ain't there a woman I can sock in the jaw? He references classism, race and culture, opportunity and the lack thereof, the corruption, this inside and outside of politics, and quite a bit more. Musically, Luther Vandross played a crucial role, crafting the call and response backing vocals that became so iconic in the song.
Eyes got cramps, look up my hands. I heard the news today, oh boy. I got it, sweet, you got the beat.
But despite all its deep American influences, the song was almost alien in its detachment. Bowie was an outsider peeking in, mimicking the sound of soul but never quite belonging to it. Young Americans presented a snapshot of an artist at a crossroads, balancing on the edge of self-destruction and reinvention. It captures Bowie's fascination with America, his descent into addiction and madness, and his relentless pursuit of transformation. Despite its dark origins, the album remains a crucial chapter in Bowie's career. Even in his most chaotic moments, Bowie could create something truly extraordinary, and this album proves it. But it all came at a cost. The drugs, the paranoia, the mania, the chaos, they were all spiraling around him during this period, and it led directly into darkness. Bowie's transformation into the Thin White Duke was outright disturbing. The Thin White Duke, an emotionless Aryan Superman persona, was born around the end of 74 or early 75, during his Plastic Soul era and the lead up to Young American's release. The name was dropped on his January 1976 album Station to Station, during which he'd fully embraced the persona. It was around this time that Bowie made controversial statements about Hitler and fascism, culminating in an infamous 1976 incident where he appeared to give a Nazi salute at Victoria Station in London. Though Bowie later denied the allegations, claiming the photographer caught him in mid-wave, he would blame his drug-induced paranoia as well. Still, the damage was done. After that incident, he began distancing himself from the controversies surrounding the Thin White Duke and fascism, stating in an interview with Daily Express, "I'm Perot. I'm everyman. What I'm doing is theater, and only theater. What you see on stage isn't sinister, it's pure clown. I'm using myself as a canvas and trying to paint the truth of our time on it. The white face, the baggy pants, they're Perot, the eternal clown, putting over the great sadness." His cocaine addiction had reached astronomical levels, leaving him gaunt, physically emaciated, and mentally unstable. He later called this the darkest period of his life, admitting that the drug use had rendered him a walking ghost. And it's true, looking at footage of him during this time is as shocking as the stories that emerged during the period. He had slipped down to about 80 pounds, which was practically nothing for someone a few inches shy of 6 feet. Throughout 1975 and into 1976, Bowie became obsessed with satanic symbols, witchcraft, and more. He survived on a diet of red peppers, milk, and hard drugs, later stating, "I was at the end of my tether, physically and emotionally, and had serious doubts about my sanity." He found himself back in California, visiting Iggy Pop in a mental institution where Pop was recovering from his own drug addictions. By the end of 1976, Bowie knew he had to escape. Again, I'll dig deeper into this time frame in next week's episode. The pair, Iggy and Bowie, fled to Berlin, retreating from the excesses of Hollywood to rebuild themselves creatively and personally. This marked the end of the Young Americans era in Plastic Soul, the end of the Thin White Duke in Station to Station, and the beginning of Bowie's Berlin trilogy, one of the most artistically daring periods of his lengthy career. I looked briefly at that escape and what came after it in my episode covering the wild stories behind the recording of Iggy Pop's 1980 album Soldier. Definitely check that one out next. And I'll see you next week when I go deeper into Bowie's obsession with the occult. That one might surprise you.